Okay, let's talk a little bit about thesis statements. If you got a little note from me saying, be more specific, or this doesn't really do the job of being a thesis statement from me today, you're not alone. It was just about everybody. So um, let's go over how to write a thesis statement, and really what it means, and how to do a good job of it. Now, there is no cookie cutter reason. I think that's getting some of you into trouble of you're trying to follow the same pattern you did on number one and number two, and they're different questions. So my first piece of advice is read the question or the prompt. What is the prompt asking you to do? And that's going to kind of guide you into how you construct your thesis statement. Your thesis statement has to make some sort of claim. And you don't want to just repeat what the prompt is. So those of you that said, like, on this one, the progressive era fostered political change. Well, that's exactly what they said in the prompt. So you've got to add more, like, why? Like, why did that happen? So read the question, figure out what they're asking. Let's look at the three different prompts that we've had in the last 3 weeks, and we'll kind of break down like how we're going to do this. The first one said evaluate the extent of the change in ideas about American independence from 1763 to 1783. Now, for this one, there is no for sure that there was a change. So basically, like, your job was to determine, and this is probably the broadest of thesis statements, is was there a change in attitude? And if so, what was that change? So you could say things like there was a significant change in the colonist attitude about moving towards independence. So you could be a little bit more vague on this one. Really, there was only a couple options. You could say they changed towards being independent. The attitude didn't change at all. They changed and they wanted to become more British, which I think is an impossible claim to support. But theoretically, if you said it, you could have scored the thesis point. I'm not sure you could have connected it to anything, but you could have tried on that one. So this was a pretty easy one to write in the fact you just had to say there was a change, and we think it was a pretty significant change in the direction of independence, or towards independence. Oops. Now the next two are a little different. The one you wrote last week about imperialism says evaluate the relative importance of different causes for the expanding role of the United States in the world in the period from 1865 to 1910. Now this is basically telling you that we did have an expanding role in the United States. So there is no kind of debate on if we had an expanded role. They're telling you that we did. What they are asking is what were the causes of that? So what were the reasons that we decided to get involved? So your thesis statement should say things like the United States had an expanding role in the world in this time period because of imperialism, because of nationalism, because of the search for greater economic markets, because of the thought that we were superior to these uncivilized countries, whatever your reasons were, for sure. Then today's one said evaluate the extent to which the progressive movement fostered political change in the United States from 1890 to 1920. Now this one I can see where there's a little bit of confusion, because it does say to what extent, almost like on the first one. However, I would tell you that the progressive era, the progressive movement, I think among historians, there's really not a lot of debate that there was big changes that were made. So I think they want to kind of, in this, they're asking, like, what were those big changes? So you're going to want to talk about, like, child labor, protection against child labor, prohibition, women's rights, protecting consumer rights, regulating businesses, trust busting, those kinds of things. Now, another little tip for people, and I know I read some of these, and I don't want to seem like I'm calling anybody out, but if it were me, you can be, you don't have to say specific, like, laws. Like, you don't have to say, like, the Volstead Act definitely limited people's freedoms or something. That limits, like, your ability to write on that later. Like, unless you know a ton about it and you can write for, like, a paragraph and there's all these different angles of it, I would be much more specific and just say prohibition. If you're going to say, like, protected child labor, you don't have to say the Keating-Owens Act. You can just say protecting child labor. That allows you to bring, later on in other paragraphs, allows you to talk about that law, but also allows you to bring in other information, other outside sources, provide more context, that sort of thing. So when you're writing the thesis, you're kind of setting up the pillars of these are my arguments. Like for the last week's one, economic reasons were one of the reasons we expanded in the world. And then in the paragraph, you can explain like how did economic reasons force the United States to get more involved. You know, they wanted to get more natural resources. They wanted to expand their reach, so they had more markets, that sort of thing. Okay. So hopefully this helps a little bit about thesis statements. If you got a note from me, you're not alone. That's okay. Again, that's what we're doing this for. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, have a great day. Hope your DBQ goes well.